I want to talk a little bit about planning and sketching. A big part of my studio process is on paper. I really like the process of drawing, and I've always liked the process of drawing. My sketchbooks are not always precious. I usually start out with the best of intentions, and then by halfway through, you know, I'm like jotting down lists of what I need to buy the next time I go to Costco. So, but they start out well. I actually have really tried to keep this one kind of disciplined with it, and so I got these new brush pens, and I was really playing around with different mark making. But then what I did was I challenged myself in January of this year to come up with 100 different compositions for plates. And so I took a form, like the littlest piece of craft foam, and I just traced it 100 different times in my sketchbook. And then I challenged myself to come up with a different composition for each one, so that I never had two that were exactly alike. And this is really great because I've got my composition already tried out on paper before I actually get my plate, and I'm forced with this blank canvas of like, what am I going to do now? I've got 100 different examples in my sketchbook about how I could possibly fill that space. And so I really wanted to keep the sketches narrative and quality, so I started doing crazy things like having this squirrel holding these scissors, because I was thinking about implements of destruction and thinking about things that we hoard and collect that are completely useless to us. Like, why would a squirrel need scissors? They've got teeth that are really sharp. But yet you see this one here, he's hoarding this whole pile of scissors.
Because like, why do we have 16 pairs but we can't find any in the house?
Yeah. I'm addicted to scissors. It's true. So I'm going to pass this around just for you all to look at. But as a counterpoint to how Tommy and I work collaboratively, and then I went with pattern for just some of them. I think this was up to 115 or something like that. And then I got some bigger ones, and then I started getting really obsessed with possums. And then more pattern, more color and pattern. But I set little rules for myself, like I'm only going to use, you know, 4 different colors on a page, and I'm going to come up with different color schemes for each one. And then when I was doing that, I started like putting the colors on the paper. Like you'll see illustrators do that sometimes when they're doing watercolors. They'll like try out the color in the margins. And I really love that idea, and I want to somehow bring that into my ceramic art, but I haven't gotten quite there yet. And then I think this might be the last page, almost. Oh, this weird shape. This was a sketch of the spoon, not this spoon, but making a spoon before I put the ball into it, just kind of like pinching out the general shape so that if I ever wanted to repeat it, I could. But I'll go ahead and pass this around for fun. Now, these were, they are brush pens. I can't remember the company right off the top of my head. I'll remember it before the end, but I can't remember it right now. In contrast to that, when Tommy and I work, we don't ever sketch anything out at all. It's purely responding to what we did before. We'll look back at pieces, or we'll look at our Instagram feed and look at pieces there and think, oh, I liked that, that worked, but we don't ever draw.
Or that didn't.
Yeah.
Let's not do that again.
But I do have the urge to sketch some things out with our work. We'll see how that goes.
I don't really like sketching. Like, I don't sketch much. Like my sketchbook would be full of like notes on ideas, or like, you know, thoughts, you know, or sentence fragments or something like that. Most of the time, I found that when I'm sketching, I'm just like throwing a bunch of pieces of clay together to see what a thing looks like, and then just trying to take a mental capture of that, or maybe an actual photograph of it, you know, which doesn't make it into my sketchbook because that's like digital and analog. They're still not playing as well as they should. But I found that the immediacy of like what the material is helps me a lot. I used to do a lot of drawing things, you know, was a bit of a draftsman, but it just kind of wore off or something, or I just didn't pursue it. So instead, it's more three-dimensional stuff. Can I talk about molds?
Yes.
So Chandra was using a mold, right? She was using her hump mold as a way of, you know, making a plate form, and I'll use molds in my work too. Do you guys use much mold, like plaster mold-like things? Yeah. Do you guys consider it cheating? I used to. It's kind of nice to be able to get to a form very quickly. This is a little pig snout. If I do this. So it was a little costume pig nose, and I've now turned it into a shot glass, or I've turned it into a series of salt and pepper shakers. The white ones are salt, the black clay is pepper, and then it has like a little pigsty that it lives in. And it is so cute. So it's the idea of like taking an object and trying to do multiple things with it. I've also thrown some bowls and then attached this to the side. So this becomes the handle for a soup bowl, or like this. Someone has encouraged me to turn it into like a creamer, which is weird because like we make cow creamers, but you don't milk pigs. I mean, maybe you do. I don't, you know, so I don't even know what that would taste like. Oh yeah, like 3 legs for a bowl. Sure, not to be confused with a bowl, which would not look like this, right? I just got this thought, like, would pig milk taste like bacon? Or, Wait, do you know? No. Oh, okay. Oh, so it'd be weird if it tasted like bacon. Okay, never mind. So this is a mold. I made a mold of this object, and I made a 3-part mold. So what I initially did was I packed this in clay to where I just had the little top of the snout, and then I cast that in plaster so that it basically was like sitting on a table like this, and then this little guy went on top like that. So I cast that piece. All the rest of this was clay, then I got rid of it. I flipped it over, had my little snout sitting there, and I filled up this little half with clay, and then I cast plaster there so that it looked like that. And then I had another little form here, and I cast a 3rd piece of plaster like so. Well, you get the idea. What that allows me to do is now have, you know, these 3 sections that are separate. And I'll kind of show you how I pack this mold. Here's kind of the fun thing about molds, is I've realized that maybe everybody who uses them this way thinks of them as a partnership. I definitely think of them as a partnership. And I think of one of the things that's really fun is to think of it as a partner that you have to get to know really well, if this is going to work. Here's why. There's a certain amount of X-ray vision that has to be employed when you're packing a mold full of clay because you've got to deal with the thickness of the walls of things. And this will make a little bit more sense once I get started. Dust kills. This thing gets really dusty. So I just dip it in water and it keeps me, I don't know, healthier, longer. Make up for smoking every once in a while. I don't know. So I'll just wrap this tight around the mold and then tie it off like so. So these pieces don't want to come apart. I used to use rubber bands, but rubber bands don't work so well when it comes to something that you're pushing against because the rubber bands stretch, right? And this doesn't. So this will stay in place. If I had a mold where I was like really pressing on the bottom instead of having it secured down here to the table, then I would wrap that rope around this as well. So I kind of bind up the whole thing. But I've got the table working for me. Inside of this shape, right, so that's the snout end, I've got these 2 little tusks that show up. And instead of adding those on separately, I'm just going to pack them into the mold. And I pack them first. I didn't do that the first time I did this. And I realized it came out without tusks, which is okay, you know, but I like the tusks. So it was like the kind of responding to what the mold had to say as far as how the thing got packed. So the idea was to pack those tusks first. So I'll just make like a little cone shape, and I just shove it into the tusk. And so you can kind of see what that looks like, right? Camera. And then I'll pack it in on the other side with another little cone. And let me tell you, you can do this for hours. And then you get like really good at it. You know that like the amount of clay that you need is like approximately this much every single time. So what I'll do is I'll compress that into a little ball to where it doesn't have a lot of creases, because Once it goes into the mold, I can't see the creases anymore to know if they're there or not. So if I know that I've gotten rid of them right now, then they're not going to be there when I stick this thing down inside. What I'm going to do is stick my thumb and a couple of different fingers, and I'm going to like try to shove that clay into every single little nook and cranny. It's going to pick up all the detail, it's going to make the form just right, but because I know the mold so well, I know where the undercuts are, where to kind of back off, you know, so I'm controlling the thickness of the object. When I first did this, it was like the bottom was really thick and the walls were really thin. But after kind of getting to know the mold, I know that I've got to shove my fingers into this area, right, to pick up the detail on that. I got to shove my fingers into that area and then that area there. You know, so at the very bottom, I'm, you know, visualizing, I'm kind of shoving, you know, the thumb down into those nostrils, and then around here in the curves, and then the very tip of the nose, and then back into that other half. And now I'm just going to start kind of pulling the clay up. So I'm compressing it against the wall as I pull. So I thought this was going to be like a brain dead type of thing. You just stick the clay in, squish it a little bit, done. And then the first couple snouts came out without the detail, the form didn't look right, you know. And I discovered that I actually had to be much more intentional than I originally thought. And then I really kind of started to like that part of the process. I've got just this one, and I've probably press molded 300 snouts out of it in a variety of different clays. So, yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm adding a coil to the top, and that's going to allow the thickness of that rim. Because even though I really liked to brag that I knew exactly how much clay went in here, I haven't actually packed this mold in quite some time. So now I'm kind of making up for lost time, and then I just admitted that to you, so all the cool points just went out the window. Yeah. Remember that one time? You said you knew. We trusted you. So in situations like this, it's all about compression. So I'm really, really compressing that clay, you know, A, to get the walls a little bit thinner, and then B, just to make sure that the piece is really strong. I've thought about slip casting them. And there's an interesting relationship that's going to develop because I think I am going to start slip casting some. There's an interesting relationship that develops between the interior and the exterior when they're press molded like this as opposed to slip cast. Because when you slip cast, you're pouring a liquid slip in and then you're pouring it out. And it's going to build up a certain thickness pretty consistently throughout the whole wall. So whatever this looks like on the outside, you're going to have kind of a softer, smaller version of that on the inside. Well, that doesn't have that now. Now it's basically got a conical type shape, you know? So the volume starts to change, the weight starts to change. And if you're really scientific, and I am not, then you would have like the perfect volume every single time you made one. And the shrinkage would always be the same, and they'd always look the same. And it's just not really my style. And maybe that's because the first snout that I ever got was like injection molded plastic, and that's how they did it. So we should just let them do it. You know, making kind of a hand-built version of it seems to be a little bit cooler. So I still go back and forth, you know, on the idea of making a slip cast mold. So we'll have to see what happens. I've kind of gotten more interested in the idea of making my own snout and then slip casting that. And I think that would be cooler. There's something about that. Okay, it's a handmade object that's now slip cast as opposed to a commercially made object that's now slip cast. You know, so there's more of a handmade relationship there. Maybe I'm less likely to get sued for patent infringement too. I don't know. Can we cut that out? Can we edit that out? What I'm doing is trimming off the excess here. You know, so you've got this, you know, kind of cut surface there, and I've got that, and you can just pop it right off like that. Kind of pull off your bindings or untie the bindings. And then just slowly separate that. So you pull the piece off like that. And I'll just kind of loosen it a little bit. So I'm not pulling it right out because I know that if I pull it right out, then I'll just rip it right out. So instead I'm just kind of gentle with it. Voila. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. You know, you're going through 2-3 seasons of the West Wing in one weekend. It's the best, you know. Gotta love Aaron Sorkin. Right? Definitely.
His piggy banks that he makes are that same technique, and they're this big.
Yeah, they're press molded much the same way. So I'm actually putting, you know, different strips of clay into the mold, pressing them up against a silicone mold. So instead of a rigid plaster mold, it's a silicone mold, and then I can pull that off the surface after kind of drying out the interior. The difference that I found between a silicone mold is that it doesn't absorb water, and the plaster one does. And the plaster one is interesting because it'll absorb water to a certain point and then it gets saturated. But if you have a deadline, you know, you just put it in the microwave, 2 minutes tops. It'll heat up, it'll steam off, you know, get a cup of tea, come back, make 25 more, do some stretches. You know. The other thing I found is that, you know, so like the pig nose looks, I think, appropriate like this. But there's a lot of people who want to drink out of it what I think is completely upside down and very inappropriate. So what I've had to do is figure out a way to kind of change the shape of that so that this reads more as funnel, and I'm hoping that it's more, you know, drink out of this end than the other end. People still laugh, so hey, what does it matter if they're drinking out of it upside down? I probably should laugh more when they're drinking out of it upside down, and then we're all having a good time. But that's where that kind of comes in, you know, so you kind of get that shape. What I'll do later is, usually I've chosen a clay that like looks awesome in its raw state. So my instinct is not to decorate the surface, it's more to just let the clay be the clay. With the exception that I'll put a little bit of glaze on the tusks and on the interior, then I'll fire that, then I'll put gold luster or something like that on the tusks, because they're fancy. And like when it's a black clay thing, then it's like silver, so it's like chrome. And then when it's a white clay thing, it's usually like a pink glaze on the inside and gold on the outside, because it's really fancy then. So those are some of the ideas. And it's just fun, and it's silly, and they're fun to make, easy to make. But I decided that I wanted to start kind of doing something else with them, and that's when the salt and pepper shaker thing came in. So I'm going to make some modifications. Do you have something you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about brushes and practice. So I have a bunch of different brushes. I get excited about trying new brushes. This one is, it's a watercolor brush that has a reservoir of water in here, and then when you squeeze it, water comes out. So it's really fun. It's the synthetic bristle, which it's definitely not for everything, but I really like it when I'm doing the squirrel tail. It makes really great brushes, tufts of fur. So I have an Amazon Prime subscription, and I just get a little bit obsessive when I get onto there and look, oh, I want that brush and this brush and this brush. So I also like to play around with different underglazes and also adding water to those. I've added a little bit of glycerin to them too, and the glycerin just improves the brushability and the translucence. And it's fun, it makes it a little bit thicker, and you can really push that color around in a way that water just doesn't allow you to do. So I'm an advocate for play, and just play around, get a nice surface that you can wipe clean and just play with different brushes and see what they do. Sure. Yeah, I think we have to move it actually, maybe like halfway to our table.
Oh yeah, since we're not really...
We're not on the wheel.
Yeah, we're not.
Are you going to get back on there?
Oh, I might trim something.
Okay. Does it move? That's okay. I could also move over.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to crowd you out, Tommy.
Oh, you know, it's fine.
So the other thing too is like Tommy was banging on the table when I was trying to draw. And it was actually, if I was really bothered by it, I would have waited until you were finished. But I do have this desire in me to loosen up a little bit. And so someone moving the table a lot while you're trying to draw something, that will loosen you up. And also working out some movements on this scrap piece of rubber is really another way to just, you're not committing to anything. You're just playing around. And I also have the same approach to tools. So I've got, don't know if you guys can see, this is a little possum, and then I'm drawing up here a trash can. And I'm going to come back in and I'm going to wax. I'm going to scratch, first I'm going to scratch through the possum to bring out the lights, and then I'm going to go back in and add some dark areas to accentuate those. I have a bunch of different tools I'm going to play around with scratching through. And the clay, when it's super wet versus when it's super dry, you get different brush strokes and you get different mark making when you scratch through. So the clay is really collaborating with you in your process, and the longer that it takes me to make something, the more the mark making changes, because the clay is drying out. And when I go to scratch through, I'm ending up like in the beginning when the clay is really soft and I scratch through, I get a really soft kind of deep mark. And by the end, when the clay is really dry, the only mark I can get is a really sharp mark because the clay has become hard. So it's about like kind of forcing yourself to work quickly during this phase that you find to be the sweet spot. So I have some different tools. I have the Scratch Lift Duster, which has a little spade on one end and then a little brush on the other side. I really like this guy. I have the Kemper Wire Stylus that is actually broken, but I really like this because it creates two parallel lines. And the Crow Quill pen will do that also. If you push down hard on some of these calligrapher's nibs, you end up with 2 or 3 lines. Yeah, I will once I get them all kind of out here. And then I have a porcupine quill also. And I don't use all of these every single time, but I like having them near so that I can quickly grab the right one when I need it. Anything else you want to see?
So I took my snout and I just added a slab to the back, and it creates like a balloon, but kind of similar to the foot, when you're trimming inside the foot ring, so that you don't have a cup that wobbles, or you don't have a bowl that wobbles. This has a nice indentation inside. 2 reasons for that. 1, so that it does kind of create a foot for the thing to sit on the table, or in its little pigsty holder. 2, because I'm going to create a larger hole. And then I'm going to get a nice little rubber plug, and that's going to be the stopper, so that's how you get your load of salt or pepper into the bottom of the sill guy. And you don't want that to now be the tiptoe thing, right? So just by making a concavity for, that thing to now sit inside of, you've figured out how to not make a flat thing. I discovered this when making the piggy banks, and I discovered that I needed to put a hole in the bottom when people were like, how do you get the money out? I'm like, well, you're not supposed to, that's the idea, And they're like, well, then I'm gonna take my business elsewhere. And I'm like, wait. Let's start putting holes in the bottom. So, when you've got to put that plug, you realize you have to put that recessed area, otherwise it does the teeter-totter. And you don't really, when you go to school, they aren't like, okay guys, now it's the piggy bank lesson, everybody, They'll teach you like how to put a handle on something and how to make a nice bowl, but you got to learn the whole piggy bank stopper thing like by hard knocks. It's just, whew. Or you fortunate people out there, So now I'm just kind of smoothing up where that slab goes. And, I could, work that in so that it's seamless, so that you don't know that it's there, or I can kind of ham it up a little bit so that you really kind of see, this thing and what it's doing. That the slab was intentionally put there. But for the most part, it's going to run along with the same type of deal. The holes, this is where I'm still kind of like learning again, what's an appropriate size hole, for the right salt that you're going to put into the shaker. And they don't teach you that in school either. I haven't found a metric or a diagram or a formula or anything. So, by hard knocks, I've just been trying to figure it out that if you've got something the size of a needle tool wiggled around a little bit, that's a millimeter number, right? That's gonna, that's a repeatable thing. That hopefully after the clay shrinks will be the right size. And then if you have 2 of them, right in the old snouty snout, that will at least get you some salt or pepper. So I'll put the holes in there, and then I'll come back with my handy dandy rubber ended thingy, and I'll kind of press that in. It seems to make those holes a little less garish, and kind of hides them just a little bit. I mean, you know that they're still kind of there, but it just overall makes the composition look a little bit better. All right, and then this slab's still kind of wet, so I'll just wait for this to dry so I can get a really nice hole. I didn't bring it with me, but most of the time I just use a drill bit. So when this thing's like leather hard, I can get a really nice, round circumference, as opposed to like, that looks like a hole and it's like a diamond, or, and like the salt's leaking out of the area the stopper just can't plug because you can't get a big enough stopper, and then nobody buys it, and why, You want to go next?
Man, it's sure nice to do a demo where you don't have to tell exactly what you're doing every step. Like,
do you want me
no,
to keep
I'm
talking?
just saying, especially when I come to drawing, because I definitely like to concentrate, and my demo drawings are never good. I use the Lug 1 right now, the black liquid underglaze one, for the drawings. And then I'm scratching through here just to bring out some lights. I'm gonna actually, this is really soft, so I'm gonna set this aside and let it dry. The other thing I really like about working this way is if I smear it or make a mistake, I can just erase it right on the surface. There's no grog in this clay or anything, so I don't have to worry about that, and I can just erase any little area that I don't like. Yeah. So I'm gonna work on scratching through a little bit more on the possum, and then I'm going to wax the whole thing and then do some inlay, fine lines around, just to put some flowers and stuff.
I'm about to throw something on the table. Do you want to make loose drawings or no?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. So I'm just making my sty. Did you know that pigsty is one word, so it's not actually appropriate to say sty? And did you know when you spell it, it looks like pigsty? And the only reason why you'd think that is because of Etsy. We've done it to ourselves. It's so weird.
So it should be Etsy?
Yes, Etsy. Yeah, they've been saying it wrong. Etsy. I don't know how thick this is going to be. We're going to ballpark it at like 3/8 of an inch, maybe a quarter. I don't find it to be that important to know.
This is the spoon that I made solid, that I'm just using the Sureform to reduce the clay down and find the form in the solid mass.
And when I made like a dozen of these pigsties, what I did was I found out the perfect little ratio of, how much space I was going to need. You can kind of see that. How much space I was going to need for these guys to live on, right, appropriately. And then I made a paper template, and then I just traced that out about a dozen times. So there is some consistency. I wasn't trying to like, reinvent the wheel every single time. But pretty loose.
Chandra, how long did you give yourself to do the 150 sketches?
I gave myself the month of January to do it. And I actually got a little obsessed with doing it, and I neglected other things.
But you don't have to mow the lawn in January, so,
So did you do a certain set amount of days?
I mean, I probably did more than I should have a day. I think I tried to do like 10 a day, but they're not like, they're pretty quick. It was just, the hard part was coming up with the idea, I think, and then one would kind of lead to the next, but then I'd get stuck and I have to go do something, take a walk, look around, think about stuff, you know. So it wasn't really possible to do them all in one sitting.
It was fun though, because like every night was like a show and tell. You know, it's like, look at these. I'm like, oh my gosh. What's with the scissors, you know? I'm getting a little freaked out. Should I be worried? Don't let it change the steak knives or something.
It's,
At what point do you put a hole in your build?
I do poke a hole in those, and I do that when I do the decoration, so that I can embed the hole into an incised line so that it's hidden a little bit. Unless it's a form that I think is going to cause me a big problem if it shrinks without, or if it, you know, if that trapped air inside there, if it needs to get out, you know, if it needs to dry, I could poke it right away and then just remember that it's there when I go and do the incised line. But usually I do it when I do the decoration. But this one's solid, so it's not going to need any kind of hole or anything. You know, working narratively, I think a lot of me personally, thinking about the narrative or the imagery existing on clay is a really great way to have an intimate relationship and share intimate ideas with people that use my work. And I really love that. I love the dialogue that it conjures up when people want to talk to me about their either love or hate for squirrels. And I've heard so many strong feelings about squirrels. And I really love this. I love it when people tell me those stories because it kind of helps me come up with new narratives and new ideas. And we've been victims of squirrels too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes, so much.
Yeah, so
We have
yeah.
video. It's horrific.
And I think it like being victimized by a squirrel helps me understand and empathize with those people who have such a negative reaction when they see squirrels on my pieces and they want to break them because they hate squirrels so much.
They want to buy it to break it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also think about like, how do these drawings, do they ever exist outside of clay? Do they exist as just drawings on paper? And what does the value, how does that value change in my own head? And I have some baggage. I definitely have some baggage about the value of the drawings on paper. I think, well, if it's a bad drawing, at least it's on a cup and someone will use it. Like, I really think that, or I used to think that a lot. And I know that that sounds kind of like it's not respectful towards ceramics, but I was like, well, it's functional, you know? And someone could actually use it and get some use out of this. Versus if it's just on a piece of paper, what's anyone going to do with a bad drawing on a piece of paper?
We had the Lawrence, Kansas, you know, wasn't far from us, and they had a really great show a couple years ago where someone had curated a show of artists who sent a plate and a drawing. And it was great social experiment to see how these mostly clay artists, almost all clay artists, had priced the plate and then the paper thing.
Oh yeah.
So you had like, this plate is worth $375. This paper thing is worth $50, right? And then this paper thing is worth $5,000 and you can have the plate for free, you know? And it was great to kind of see like, because you know some of the people who are in the show and you're like, wow, that person really thinks that drawing's worth nothing, right? And they were good, I mean, it was all good work. And then someone else is like, wow, they should have been a painter. What are they doing making ceramics? You know?
I think your design, Chandra, would be great.
Oh,
I think you should have an apron with your design.
that would be really cool. I would love that.
Should we tell them about the pins?
Well, I got an iPad Pro kind of in the desire to maybe do some digital drawings, and I've really enjoyed that. It's this great tool. It has this stylus, this Apple Pencil that you can really, it's touch sensitive, it's pressure sensitive, you can draw, you can get so many different marks, and it's really fun, but it is a completely different line quality. Drawing on glass is just so different from the resistance that you feel when you carve through clay, and I love that resistance because it helps me to control my line quality, and paper and glass, they're just not the same. But I did think about, like, you know, there's a lot of companies that will help you create textiles, you know, Spoonflower, for example, and so I did do some designing of some enamel pins. I drew a squirrel one, and then I did an unwanted hair follicle, and then I did a lawn chair. And I've sold those. It's kind of fun. I mean, they're definitely a different price point and a whole different collector than the ceramic collector.
Yeah, it's really great because there's people who will contact who are in like cosmetology school, and they're like, oh my gosh, that unwanted hair is hilarious. It's like, yeah.
I've just always
Buy 'em
thought
for your
that,
friend, yeah.
I've always thought the term unwanted hair was just really sad. Yes, yes.
Oh, like a rabbit in a dumpster? Wait, too far? Sorry.
Too far for public television.
For public television. Can we edit that out?
No. I think I'm about ready to stop with this. The Sureform curve is like exactly the same curve that I've got going on the underside of my scoop, which I really like. It's a little soft.
Do you fire those on stills typically, or how do you fire those?
I do. So I've tried a whole bunch of different ways to fire these, and so I'll just tell you what I do. I find the balance point like this, and I sign my name right there every single time, and then I balance it on a kiln post so that I can glaze everything except for where my name is signed, and then I sand that down so you can't really tell. Like when you run your hand over it, it feels smooth, and it's not like, ooh, unglazed area. It's just like, oh, that's soft, it's nice. But yeah. I've tried so many crazy things to try to fire these though, like
Made our own stilts.
one guy had me carving out, one person was like, you should carve a soft brick and fire it twice to 2 different temperatures. So basically the soft brick like held the scoop, and I fired this part to like cone 5, and then I turned it over and then stuck it in the soft brick and fired this part to 04. It was bad result. It wasn't good. I think part of it is I've never figured out how to get glaze to stick to something that's already got cone 5, you know, that's been fired to cone 5. Have you guys? I've heard like glue, starch, heating it up. What? Rudy Audio did low fire. On stuff that had already, he did
On stoneware.
on stoneware.
Yeah.
After it had already been.
Low fire glaze. Yeah, the Rudy Audio put low fire glaze on stoneware. Yeah, but those guys were like gods among men. So I mean, how are we supposed to do what they did? Oh yeah, airbrush work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Put it in the microwave or something.
So really, if you do 5 times more work than just leaving a bare spot and sanding it, that's, yeah.
Yeah, but I had to fire it to a high temperature first so that I could flip it over. It was totally convoluted, and I would not recommend it to anyone. Okay. Try to. You gonna trim that?
Yeah. You gonna decorate those other ones?
I'm gonna see about this cup.
All right. Oh, do you want a yonder banding wheel?
Yeah. Where was that?
Oh, I don't know. I just found it. So the working surface that I have on my table in my studio is Hardybacker board. You guys ever use that as a working surface? It's kind of awesome. It doesn't leave a texture like canvas or canvas texture. It kind of doesn't really leave a texture at all, and it helps to wick water. So, I just made my little pigsty guy, and normally I'll make half dozen of those at a time, or a full dozen. And by the time I've cut them all out, thrown out the slabs, cut them all, they've firmed up simply by sitting on that surface. And so then I can pull that, put a coil around it, and then put it aside, and it's already it's firming up by the time I get to the 12th one. So you've got this material that's kind of almost working as a studio assistant for you, because it's drying things, while you're working. You can dry them too much, it can be a liability, and so you kind of have to go the other direction, putting it into a damp box or something like that. But man, is it awesome. I mean, you can just kind of plow through work, and you've got to have stuff that's absorbing things. So this little guy's going to set up for a little while, and I think I'm going to trim the bowl.
Where's the bowl?
And you're going to decorate the cup.
Yeah, I'm decorating the cup.
Decorating the cup.
This is it's that slip sidge mixture, which it's also another very convoluted thing. It's like, so I like the properties of terra sigillata because they're like pantyhose. And I like the properties of slip because it's like jeans. Pantyhose or tights.
So you're making jeggings.
I'm making jeggings.
All right.
But I'm not concerned with the properties of terra sigillata at low fire, and I'm not concerned with the sheen or burnishing it in any way. So that's not what I want to get. I just like that thin skin, but I want to be able to put a glaze on it and not have the glaze eat through it. So I just added half of slip to a mixture of fake sidge one time, and I was like, I think this is the consistency that I want. It's not sidge. It's really just thin slip, but we call it slidge. The slidge.
That's patented, by the way, in the lower 48 states, so. Actually, we should probably patent that in the lower 48 states.
Yeah. Sure. So this sponge brush, this cheap sponge brush, to me, it just makes this great line, It's like, it rides over this texture. I messed up a little bit right there when I moved the brush up, but it rides over the texture nicely. It like holds enough liquid that it seeps into the texture when I'm brushing it across. So who knew that a cheap sponge brush would be such a great thing? And it works even better when the clay is a little drier. Thanks. Yeah, well, this one just has zinc, I think. Wait, not zinc. I don't know. Whatever white opacifier. No, it's zinc, right, Tommy?
Well, it could be tin, or it
No,
could
it's
be
not tin.
Zercopax, but it's never going to be.
Oh, it's Zercopax.
There you go.
It's Zercopax.
The other Z.
It's Zercopax. You can visualize it in your studio. It's that bag of white stuff.
No, that's something else. Thanks, Glennis.
And this pink has the 60-20 Mason stain. I know that much.
I really love trimming. Do you guys love trimming? I used to love trimming because it made all my bad pots look better. Now I just realized it can make my bad pots look better, but I've gotten better at throwing, so I get to make more bad pots look better.
Somebody had a question.
There's a question?
We can't see the surface of the wood.
Oh yeah, and I'm using 4 wads. You know how people use 3 wads? Yeah, I use 3 wads. And I don't know why you're not supposed to use 4, but I love using 4. And here's the reason why I love using 4, right? Well, here's what I would do. I would use 3, right? It'd be like, you put one here, and then it like moves a little bit. And then you put one here, and it's like all, so it takes forever to recenter a bowl when it's upside down, right? I mean, forever until you learn how to tap center. It just, you know. So then you go and you put the 3 wads down, and then it's off anyway. I mean, you just want to give up. It's infuriating. I'm like, why am I still doing this? So, so I just use 2, and I've just gotten better at using equal pressure and pressing down at the same time on both sides, and then turn. And equal pressure on both sides, and just push down. And it works, and things don't fly off the wheel. They used to fly off the wheel all the time. So whatever Zen genius thought that you needed to, you know, use 3 wads. What's that? Oh, I don't know. Is that a thing you can do? Does it work? Oh my gosh,
The
really?
debate is, why don't you wet your wheel head? And then someone said that it will make your piece really stick, which then you can't get it off.
But then they say, can we do this on television? All right. So yeah, here's the thing. Wet wheel head. I mean, I've heard of this, but like for me, this is like a Loch Ness monster, so I want to see if it's real. What? Okay. And slightly warped bowl can now go onto. Ooh. Okay. All right, and then you put it in the center, right? Center, and you just like. You're on stage here, Glennis. What are we doing? Oh, you still put the clay on it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were doing this instead of the wads. What the heck? This is ridiculous. I've totally now adhered my bowl that is now slightly warped to the wheel head, and according to Kip, I'm not going to be able to get it back off. And I'm still putting wads down. Best demo ever. Man. Trimming by committee. This is why you don't do it. I swear. All right.
Early stages of collaboration.
Yeah, this is someone trying to weasel in on the collaboration. She mentioned this in the break. This is a thing. If she can't do it by form and she can't do it by surface, she'll do it by process.
That's valid.
That's valid. Anyway, I like trimming. It's nice. Trimming's one of those great things because again, you kind of work on your X-ray vision. You know, like do you remember what that thing looked like on the inside? You know, I really love trying to echo that form. You know, try to echo that same curve. Maybe a little bit because of weight, maybe because it just seems appropriate to do so. Maybe it's just a challenge of it, but it just seems right, you know, to have a nice curve. And you know, how often do we look at the bottoms of bowls? I mean, we don't a whole lot when you consider they get used right side up most of the time. But just, I don't know, putting that curve there is nice. I remember my undergrad professor used to say that if you're going to spend all the time to trim a foot like that, you should at least put a foot, you know, indicator of the foot on the outside. And we do the exact opposite of that with these bowls, you know. And I'm okay with it, but it's just every single bowl I make, I'm like, I'm not doing what my professor said. And I'm getting away with it. All right, so that's basically that. But, you know, I mean, you kind of saw this would have been, as soft as this kind of is, it would have been nice to do this on a bat. But it doesn't matter, we're not going to be able to get it off.
Oh.
Aww. Oh, did you do something loose because of that? Loose drawing? So then what we'll do is I like to oval these things. So sometimes I'll do it on the wheel, and when I do it on the wheel, it's usually like right around the time that it's been thrown. So I don't often alter it after trimming it, but for the sake of the demo and not wanting to screw up the trimming demo, I'm doing it after. But I'll use the holes. Either a square bat or the holes that you find in your bat or the holes that are in your wheel head. So it's like this is exactly opposite of this. And I'm usually kind of pointing it on the opposite side of me and then turning the thing. And then pointing it. It actually still trims the same way. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll put, it's a good question, and let's address that. So I kind of oval this like this, oval like that, right? And so imagine this thing doesn't have a foot trimmed on the bottom. Then it goes on there, but it's like rockabilly, right? So I'll just get 2 pieces of clay and I'll stick them underneath the ends, and then I'll wad that, and then I'll wad those sides. And it's usually stiffer by that time than this is. So everything seems to hold together okay. You know, there's been a lot of this kind of football shape, but we've also talked about making it threes, you know, kind of going with that. We just haven't done it yet. And I'll usually sureform that, you know, or I'll zest it.
Here. You want to sureform it? It's not ready?
No.
Okay.
And I have a red one, thank you very much,
Oh.
with the red clay on it.
Oh.
What are we doing now?
So I tried to lay down some information, make some moves on this piece before I put the sidge down. I like doing that because after the bisque, I rub underglaze onto the surface and then wipe that away, and that underglaze seeps into those little areas of information that I thought I had erased, and it really gives a little bit of mystery to the pot that is like, it's like just looking at something that used to be there that's no longer there, but you could still kind of see the remnants of it, and I really like that. So I just carved some lines, and I like the way that I divided up the space. In my own work, I've spent a lot of time looking at aerial images of parks and playgrounds and that kind of thing. I grew up in farm country around what I call landscapes of labor, where the whole land is dedicated to this functional, useful purpose. And when I moved to Florida for graduate school, and then I lived down in West Palm for a year, it was like all of the land is used for this showing of wealth and golf and like all of this crazy stuff. So it's like.
And if you're not from Florida, yeah, and you're only looking at the coastal regions.
Well, I was in West Palm, I just said.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Florida's a huge state. West Palm was very much about showing, well, not West Palm, but Palm Beach. And thinking about manicured landscapes and controlling nature, and aerial views of golf courses have the most playful shapes. You know, they're like these bouncing cloud-like forms or these like organic shapes. And a path in a public park is usually like this beautiful line, you know, that's curved and organic. And I love the rigid ones too. You know, you see some of those English country gardens from the aerial view, you know, they're really perfectly planned out. So I like thinking about dividing up space on a cup in the way that space is divided up in our landscape also by humans. And I think with Tommy and my work, I'm thinking about space being divided up in a more organized way, like in the city, and how traffic lines tell you where to drive, and it all is about conveying some sort of information, you know, that's very practical and useful. So it's kind of a blend of that like landscape of labor, landscape of leisure kind of thing. So we sometimes go around and take photographs, and then we're like, our work looks just like the city. But it's one of those things like it's a chicken and the egg. You don't know exactly what happened first. If you made the work in response to the city, I think we tried, but we weren't sure how influenced it was going to be for us. And then I took some pictures recently of like, it was a gray kind of cloudy day. So like the color palette of the whole picture was really muted and grayed down, but there were these great orange traffic cones that were stacked up like a family along like a horizontal line. And then they were, in the background were these really severe buildings with like these really rigid lines and horizontal lines. And I was like, wow, I totally see our pots in that, you know. What do you say? What are you talking about over there?
Nothing. No,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay.
It was pretty wild when she showed me the picture, though, because it was totally laid out, you know, exactly like that. And we, you know, we put together slideshows and things like that. So like you start to see these images of like, I saw this, and then we just happened to make a pot a month before that looked like this, you know, and kind of matching up. I mean, when the collaboration first started, there was a question of, you know, are we going to reference actual objects? You know, so we did. We put some domestic objects, you know, onto some of the cups, and it just didn't fit, you know. So like heading in a more abstract direction, you know, was pretty cool. And then to see that affirmed, kind of by the city itself through the landscapes, it's just, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right.
First exhibition you guys did together, how did you decide which shapes to do and what forms to do? Was that ever interesting, or did you just decide we're gonna use the plate, you know, like standard stuff?
Well, yeah, actually, that was the nice part is we had a safety net because the show was curated under the idea that it would be tableware, you know, so we at least had a direction to go in. And with that, you know, it's like, but there was no expectation as far as, you know, what type of tableware or how much or what specific objects. But, you know, when you're already used to making bowls, plates, cups, you know, you can kind of head in that direction. We made a set of coasters, which we never made coasters before. So we made some coasters for that, and we made some cheese board forms, which those really weren't things that I was that familiar with. Maybe you guys have this here, but in Kansas City, there's a really big love for mid-century modern knickknacks and furniture and all kinds of things. And there's a couple great outlets where you can find that stuff in Kansas City.